But I thought to kick it off today, we should first acknowledge a birthday.
Birthday. Whose birthday is it?
It's Curiosity's birthday. 5 years on Mars. Thought you'd be all into that.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the concept of curiosity.
That's probably a little.
I think it's a little older than that.
Yeah. No, the Mars rover Curiosity celebrated its 5th birthday yesterday.
Oh, good for him or her.
Isn't that exciting? There was a big news article that the Mars rover Curiosity can celebrate its birthday by singing to itself. That there was a little Easter egg programmer hack.
Oh yeah.
I delved into the details a little bit, and apparently they did kind of code this, but it only hums "Happy Birthday" and it only happened once on 2013.
It has a way of producing sound on Mars.
Apparently, yeah.
Some sort of vibrating fan or something.
Well, here I'll send you the link.
Twitter. I follow Mars Curiosity, but I didn't see this.
Really?
Oh, I see. Okay. I'm watching a video.
Scintillating.
Yes.
Podcast entertainment. I am waiting on Tom watching a video.
I'm trying to get to the fast forward to the part where it actually makes some sound.
All right. I actually haven't listened to it myself. I just saw the link. I'm one of those terrible people that sends links without actually watching the content of the link. I tend to do that.
It makes just a little electronic noise, yeah. All right.
Yeah, so there you go. So I don't follow Curiosity as much as you do, but I presume that given the fact that it's still around, it's been a runaway success based on what their expectations were.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's exceeded its design lifetime. And it's still plugging away up there.
That's awesome.
I'm just looking through its Twitter feed now.
These are the people who manage Curiosity, to be clear. This isn't Curiosity itself tweeting from Mars, right?
Or is it?
Well, I mean, that would be cool. You could definitely do that next time. All you'd have to do is for a little chatbot subroutine and then take the whatever the observation of the day was, run it through some sort of converter, and then post to Twitter.
I wonder when. I'm sure at some point there's going to be a robotic spacecraft that is hardwired connected into social media.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not inconceivable right now. It just would take a little while because it would have to send the message back, and then. I mean, I'm sure Wi-Fi is pretty hard on Mars, but you could certainly automate the process of coming up the tweet and all that.
Yeah, just status messages.
Yeah.
This is my internal temperature.
Oh yeah, and the capacity for AI chatbots to resemble human interaction has gotten orders of magnitudes of improvement in the last couple of years even. The ability to simulate human conversation, right, and interaction. You could imagine Curiosity having a, hey, it's been 10 years and they never thought I'd make it. I'm still on Mars. AMA. Let's chat with Curiosity. Yeah, so I saw this and I was like, with all these newly interactive things happening on other planets, there's got to be some opportunity there. So I don't know if you're looking for a new job, Tom, but I want to send you this job opportunity I saw online. I really think you'd be into this.
Okay.
And so I am sending it to you now. This is from NASA. So you're all into NASA. So this is from NASA.
Yeah.
You've never worked for NASA, have you?
No, of course not.
Okay, so this is. So are you reading it now?
I saw this tweeted out the other day. I didn't look at the details of it,
Okay.
of the actual job description, but the job title is intriguing.
Yeah. So planetary protection officer
Mm-hmm.
at NASA headquarters. This is an actual job. Pretty decent salary.
Yeah.
And so you could sort of scroll through the overview. It looks like, so the boring kind of explanation is that as things leave our planet and come back from other planets, we want to ensure that there isn't biological contamination.
Right. Yeah.
So based on this job description, that seems like the boring administrative part of this job. So if you scroll down to qualifications, then you get into the really interesting aspects of this job. So qualification must be a recognized subject matter expert in advanced knowledge of planetary protection.
Okay.
So I'm sure there's a large candidate pool for that. includes demonstrated technical expertise to independently form technically sound judgments and evaluations in considerably complex situations. Okay. And then skipping ahead a bit, demonstrated skill and diplomacy that resulted in win-win solutions during extremely difficult and complex multilateral discussions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on this job.
Well, so basically, you are the representative of Earth. So when the aliens come down and are like, "Yo, we want some of those cool resources," you can work it out with them. I thought it was interesting how they described that a requirement was resulting in win-win situations, a non-zero sum game, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Which reminds me of a link that you sent me recently.
I did send you a link. I like to send you links.
You do like to send me links.
This latest link I sent you was from Nicky Case. Were you familiar with Nicky Case before I sent this to you?
I was not familiar with Nicky Case, but I was very happy to make his acquaintance online.
Yeah, this is someone I've been following I've been following his work for a little bit of time because he makes very interesting, what would you call them? Interactive simulations or games or something like that.
Yeah, JavaScript developer with web developer with some interesting ideas that he's able to express through his code.
Yeah, he likes to create like interactive visualizations that kind of teach you something about behavior or systems and stuff like that.
Learn by doing. Learn by like getting your feet wet a little bit with the idea.
Yes, exactly. And so his latest creation is the one I sent you because I thought it'd be something that you'd be interested in talking about because it seemed like to hit upon the areas that we share in common as far as interests.
Yeah, so this is essentially a tour through the prisoner's dilemma and gets into game theory and trust and evolution and all those sorts of things. So, well, let me ask you first off, do you have any kind of hard knowledge background in game theory?
No, I do not.
Because you play a lot of games.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you're an expert in game theory, though.
Right. Okay, so you've never studied game theory itself.
No.
Right. Neither have I. So that should be our caveat in this whole discussion: is that we are armchair game theorists at best.
At best, yes.
Because after going through this, it brings up a lot of interesting ideas, and so I did try to do a little bit of understanding of the baseline concepts.
Yeah.
And I got to like the second level Wikipedia reference, right, on what game theory is. And as I was going through, it became clear to me that without a decent amount of time, you do need to like give yourself some space to acquire all the knowledge of game theory. So it's like this can bring up interesting ideas, but you're not going to get the full picture.
Right. I mean, it's a very, very extremely deep subject, but this game that Nicky Case has created called The Evolution of Trust gives you kind of a window into that world of game theory so that you can get a glimpse of the depth of it, but you don't need to understand all the great details of it to get a sense of what's going on. So it's like all great visualizations. It communicates a deeper idea with a simple presentation.
Yeah. So how would you describe the base level of what's going on here? A little.
Well, I think if anyone's interested, they should take a look at it. Maybe even pause right now, go to Nicky Case's website. Link is in the show notes, and just play around with it. It takes about 20, 30 minutes to go through, I think.
So should we describe like the prisoner's dilemma or just the basic, the core game of what's going on here?
Yeah. Let's do that.
So Tom, how would you describe the prisoner's dilemma, which is the game that is going on here?
The prisoner's dilemma. That's a hypothetical situation where two people are trying to make a decision that's in the best interest of themselves, taking into account what their compatriot might choose.
Right. And it's called the prisoner's dilemma because the first version of it from some game theorists in the 50s was that these two criminals get arrested and they're being interrogated separately,
right,
by the police, so they don't know what the other person is doing.
So their answers, their actions in that situation have to take into account what they imagine their compatriot action might be, because what they do can affect what their decision is, and vice versa.
Right. And in the prisoner's dilemma example, you basically have a choice between cooperating or defecting. And in the Nicky Case game, he calls it cheating. But basically, in the prisoner, cooperating is just to stay silent, not tell the cops anything.
Mhm.
And so they don't have enough information to convict you on the larger charge, but they are able to put you into prison for a little bit. So that's a fairly good outcome. If you cooperate, but your partner defects, then it's a really bad outcome for you. You go to prison and they go free. If on the other hand, you defect, but your partner cooperates, then you go free and they go to prison. And if you both rat out the other guy, you still get sent to prison.
So in this game that Nicky Case created, he kind of simplifies it and makes it easier to understand by having this, instead of the prisoner's dilemma, instead of two people in prison, you have two cartoon characters who are basically putting a coin or not putting a coin into this magic money machine. And depending on what you do, you get a different result. If you put one coin in and your compatriot puts a coin in, then you both get 2 coins. If you don't put a coin in and your compatriot puts a coin in, you get 3 coins. That's called cheating in this game, and vice versa. And if you both cheat, then obviously you both get 0 coins.
Right.
So the outcomes you can have are either 0 coins, 2 coins, or 3 coins, depending on what your behavior is.
Right. And so like the first level conclusion is that if you're playing this game once, the best strategy is to cheat.
Right, because you'll get 3 coins instead of 2 or 0.
But then he sort of evolves this idea, right, in terms of what happens if you play multiple games, and then what happens if you play with players of different strategies, and then what happens if you play multiple games with players of different strategies where there's a different number of those different players going on, and then how can we? So he's not just a theorist here. Like he seems to have some kind of a ethical drive here, where because the whole game is called the evolution of trust.
Right.
So this isn't just an academic exploration of the prisoner's dilemma. He's talking about why don't we trust each other? Because he talks about this this event that happened in World War I that I didn't actually know was accurate or apocryphal. And at the Western Front, where the
Christmas truce.
Yeah, where the British and the German soldiers came out of their trenches into the no man's land, and they
exchanged gifts and played football.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, how is that possible that you could have this momentary bubble of trust, and then in another situation he's asking the question during non-war time, why do you have pockets of distrust evolve? And so exploring that. Pretty cool. Should we jump to the conclusion, or should we leave that as an exercise for the users? Because he does have a sort of recommendation right at the end about how to evolve trust.
Yeah, I think that's worth talking about, because that can go into other directions.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this first before we get there. Like, as you were going through, is there anything that like wicked surprised you about how the simulation was evolving?
Surprised me.
I guess what was so interesting to you about this that was engaging for you?
The reason I liked it is because as you have these repeated interactions with your compatriot at the coin machine, he shows you how you can develop trust and lead to beneficial outcomes for both of you in the long run. And I liked it because he tried to present a kind of a mathematical reasoning for, the golden rule, the universal principle that's the foundation of all human morality. And the fact that there can be a game theory mathematical justification for that doesn't require a supernatural cause appeals to my particular brain, I guess.
the mathematical underpinnings of why it's a good idea to
be kind to one another, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, basically that there's good sound reasoning as to why you might want to pick a strategy that also benefits someone else. It's sort of the duality between a zero-sum game and a non-zero-sum game.
Right. Playing through the simulations clearly demonstrates that in the short term, being a jerk and cheating can get you ahead. But in the long term, cooperating with others is the better long-term strategy based on this particular interpretation of game theory.
Right. Cooperating is the best long-term strategy for your own self-interest.
Right.
In order to maximize your own score. Which
I guess is a non-obvious conclusion to come to, because you would think that a selfish motivation for your actions would be better for you. But in some circumstances, it's clearly not the case.
Yeah, I found it interesting because there's so many different tendrils of this idea.
Yeah.
So like one of the underlying reasons why the prisoner's dilemma has been so interesting for so long is that even though with the one shot version of the game where you're just playing somebody once, the best strategy is to cheat.
Right. Because there's no consequences if you just play once.
Right. In other words, the most rational strategy is to cheat. If you were purely rational, what they researchers find in experimentation is that humans have a bias to cooperate more often than they should,
Hmm.
which is not intuitive. So now you're talking about, well, what's the best strategy in a purely if you're playing against an AI, pure non-human in a one-shot game, it would be to cheat. But if you're playing against other humans, what are they motivated by? And you know the general sense of humans are social animals, and we have this need to connect, blah blah blah. But it's interesting that there's a consistent, they call a systemic bias for humans to cooperate.
Well, it must have an evolutionary benefit for the same reason why it's in the long run it's better to cooperate in this particular simulation.
Yes, in fact, I think we touched on this idea a little bit when I was breaking down the election thing and social interactions there. But this idea, if you think of cavemen back in the day and they encounter other humans, the immediate survival need is, can I trust this person?
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily, oh, can he build a fire? Can she do X, Y, Z? It's can I turn my back on them without them, taking advantage of me? And so this idea, this need to very quickly evaluate trust, and then you can see the advantage is that, okay, if I feel like I can trust these 4 other humans, then if we work together, we're going to be much more effective at surviving than if I was just on my own.
Right.
So there's what's reasonable in your own immediate self-interest. There's what's most advantageous to expanding the scope of trust with others. There's also emotion, right? I mean, he doesn't call that out in this particular simulation as a specific variable, but if you're going along with somebody and you're trusting, and then all of a sudden they burn you, that can be a very emotionally negative experience.
Yes, and he deals with that in the simulation when he introduces the concept of the miscommunication or the mistakes happening in the game.
Right. I mean, this could be kind of a pretty common experience in human interactions, right? Where you feel good about someone, and then you feel like somebody intentionally was totally not acting in your self-interest. And so,
Right.
so then what are you going to do afterwards?
Yep.
Right? Do you give them a pass? Which in his terminology is, do you continue to cooperate, or you're like, whatever,
Yeah.
fool me once, shame on me.
And that's another neat thing about the simulation is that it presents a game theory justification for a certain level of forgiveness too.
Right. And then and then he talks about that there's like a limit to it, right? That if you keep forgiving past a certain percentage, then it's stretching the bounds of reason, and then you don't really know what the other person's strategy is.
Yeah.
So for example, if you're playing 100 games in a row with a person and you're trusting, oh, and then all of a sudden they cheat, and then they trust. You can see that as an aberrant anomaly. But if somebody is cheating, trusting, cheating, it's a lot harder to think that those 8 or 9 cheats were all mistakes.
Right.
And what I thought was interesting was, so when he gets into the mass simulation where you have different strategies all interacting with each other. So he sets up these characters, right? Where we have certain characters that are always cheating,
Yep.
certain characters that are always cooperating.
And then there's the copycat who is doing the tit for tat strategy where he copies
Yes.
whatever action that you take.
So Tom, do you still listen to the Adventure Zone?
Occasionally, yep. I haven't listened to it recently though.
Did you listen to the Suffering Game arc?
I did not.
Oh, okay. So you are now podcastly conscripted to go back and listen to the Suffering Game arc, because he introduces the prisoner's dilemma in the Suffering Game.
Oh, okay.
Basically, they're in this dungeon, and periodically they come upon this room where they have to either cooperate with the unknown other travelers, and if they do, they face a like medium level monster. If they cheat but the other travelers cooperate, then they face a very weak monster.
Mhm.
But if they agree and the other people cheat, then they face a very difficult monster. And so the strategy that the boys used was the copycat, the tit for tat.
Mhm.
So which is you trust on your first go, and then afterwards you do what your opponent did the last time. So it's basically, oh, if you trusted me, then I'll continue to trust you. But if you burn me, then I'm going to burn you.
Yep. Yep.
Played in that pure sense, it's an effective, but apparently it's a myth that this is the optimal strategy in group dynamics. But which is this is the point, by the way, that I stopped reading game theory. There's like another 12 pages to go to explain why this is not the optimal strategy. I'm like, yeah, I'm good with that. But right. So if you don't insert any level of forgiveness, then one mistake by your opponent will completely flip you over to not cooperating for the rest of the iterations. Right.
Right.
So there was a little bit of discussion of the prisoner's dilemma in the Taz Reddit, and there was a cool study that came out in 2016. I'm sending you a link to this article. So the title of this research paper, I won't go into all the details here because I don't understand game theory that much. Resilient cooperators and so in the Nicky Case example, this is the role that is always cooperating.
Yep.
Stabilize long-run cooperation in the finitely repeated prisoner's dilemma. So without going through all the details here, basically, if I understand the thrust of this article correctly,
yeah.
If you in that group dynamic, right, where you have lots of different actors with lots of different strategies, if you can get a certain percent of agents that are playing the always cooperate, you can achieve a balance, an equilibrium. And I won't say Nash equilibrium because I really tried hard to understand that concept and I just couldn't quite get it. But basically, equilibrium meaning the whole system doesn't collapse into being dominated by always cheats. Because this is just a theoretical exercise here, but you can imagine in a real world system, if everybody cheats, then the ability for everybody to cooperate is destroyed. So if your theoretical goal is to try and establish a system in which there's a high level of cooperation, despite there being nasty actors that are cheating or frequently cheating, a way to inoculate the group from that is to get a certain percentage of agents that are what they call resilient cooperators.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be about 35-40%, at least in this study, is what it's indicated. And the thing about it is that it's not just that these agents are cooperating, it's that they continue to cooperate at great personal cost.
This is starting to hit a little close to home for me.
How so?
This sounds exactly how I behave on my commute every day.
You're a resilient cooperator.
I'm a resilient cooperator, right? I follow the speed limits. I don't tailgate. I allow people to merge into lanes.
Right.
Frequently, I'm absolutely abused by all the always cheaters on the highway, but I still do it because in the long run, I think it's better off for everyone on the highway if more people cooperate with each other.
Right. And so I really liked this idea. I started thinking it in terms of climate change and other group dynamics like that. But basically, and again, I didn't read the whole article, so I may be mangling the theoretical expression. But the way I took this idea is that if you're constantly cooperating and then you encounter one of these always cheat nasties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they burn you. And then maybe you get burned again by another nasty. And then maybe somebody makes a mistake and they burn you a third time. You're not going to turn into an always cheat or an always don't cooperate. You're taking the high road. And so it's resilient cooperators because your strategy is not being affected by the accumulated affect of the other agents. And so what that does is that it makes it more likely that when agents that would like to cooperate but are maybe not as resilient as you are, they're more likely to get a cooperator because there you are, right? And so if those people sort of in the middle, like in the gray area, like maybe they would cut you off, but there was Tom like yielding for them and made them feel really good. Now maybe the next time somebody cuts them off, they're less likely to react to that.
Yeah, I like this. I want some sort of game theory justification so I don't have to feel so bad every day by people swerving in and around me on the highway.
Right.
and flipping me off and honking. I'm trying to improve the system, folks.
Dude, how slow are you driving? Do you drive like at the speed limit or like close to the speed limit?
I drive close to the speed limit, yeah.
Okay, so you're not going like 30 on the
No,
pike.
no.
Okay.
In my experience on the highway, the speeding is not so much the bad actor. It's more tailgating is the person that is causing the most carnage on the highway as far as creating traffic. They are the always cheaters in this scenario.
Yeah. And it's funny too because even if you wanted to always cheat, even if you were totally trying to act efficiently in your own self-interest, tailgating doesn't actually work.
Right.
Like
Doesn't.
Like if you wanted to get from point A to point B the fastest and not care about anybody else, what you would do is drive as fast as you possibly can on the open road. And then once you hit traffic, you would actually try and give yourself a little room between yourself and the car in front of you so that you could swerve over and switch lanes.
Yeah.
You know, if you were really paying attention.
Yeah.
You know, and so cutting off people is advantageous. Tailgating is not.
Yeah. The only thing it accomplishes is just makes everyone miserable around you.
Right.
And in my opinion, it's probably the cause of 99% of all the highway traffic is people just tailgating and following too closely.
Well, there was a great YouTube breakdown of that by CGP, right?
Gray's video on how to solve traffic problems. And that was the conclusion he came to too, is that leaving enough space between you and the cars around you to allow other people to maneuver.
Right.
And allow you time to react is the best way to relieve traffic congestion. And in my experience, it's absolutely true.
Yes. I would say the problem has been exacerbated / conflated with phone distracted driving.
Yeah.
The closer you are to the car in front of you, the more likely you are to rear end them. However, you can be a safe distance, but if you're checking Twitter, and then the car in front of you stops, it doesn't matter how much time you have. Yeah. Your reaction time is not a variable if you're not reacting.
So I go out of my way to be a resilient cooperator in those situations.
Good for you, Tom.
Always giving a lot of space between myself and the car in front of me. And so people will swerve in and cut through. You know, they're the always cheaters in this scenario, but
right.
I forgive them.
I took a really wide-ranging, fluffy conclusion from this. Basically, that in all of my personal interactions, if I always take the high road, if I'm always sort of treating people with the most sort of selfless, compassionate attention, the most positive, supportive thing I could possibly do, even if they don't quote unquote deserve it, or even if they've made a mistake and burned me in the past, or even if they're not reciprocating, the ideal sort of interaction is to resiliently cooperate in that sense. Resilient cooperation in this sense is to act out of sort of selfless compassion, right? And so if that affects them by making it more likely that as their agency evolves, they'll treat people more like that than if they were in an environment where they're constantly getting burned and taken advantage of, then they'll have that effect, right? And so it's a network, right, that ripples outward.
Yep.
And then when they raise children, they'll be expressing that approach to them just by osmosis, right? And then that's how the species evolves. That's how we get from being a purely either self-interested or I'm going to cooperate, but just because it's in my self-interest, to like actually being motivated by compassion, right? Because if you're truly only concerned about your own self-interest, your own score in the group dynamic, then resilient cooperation is not a rational strategy. Like if all you're personally trying to do, Tom, is minimize how often people cut you off or cheat on you, for example, then your strategy is not rational. But you have a desire to advance the cause of the whole group. That is, you have a selfless view on it.
Right, because driving in traffic is not a zero-sum game. I'm not going to get to my destination quicker if I create havoc on the road. It's just going to cause traffic for everyone and slow everyone down. There is a win-win situation for driving in traffic.
It was cool because it made me think of our original climate change discussion in terms of like, well, what can you do to solve such an enormous systemic problem? And so we talked about changing ourselves and having that try and emanate through the world, which is like a fluffy idea if it's not sort of just explain, if it doesn't have an associated specific explanation of how that actually happens. Like, okay, be nice, and then well, what does that mean? So here's like a nice little mathematical explanation about how your strategic approach to a group dynamic can propagate outwards and affect the strategic approach of other individuals in a group dynamic, which then goes on and on and on.
That's why I loved it. That's why I wanted to forward it right over to you as soon as I saw it. I was like, oh, this is something I think Ped would like to.
Cool.
I just love that you can have a game theory explanation for human morality. The way my particular brain works, mathematics is closer to truth than any kind of holy book.
1 + 1 = 2. So at the conclusion of this interaction.
Yeah, so after you go through all the simulations that Nicky has you run through, he has 3 recommendations for developing trust in these kind of complex systems.
So I guess if you are an aspiring, resilient cooperator,
right,
and yet you had not established this in yourself, how could you acquire it?
Yes. So the first one he suggests is that you need to have repeat interactions in order to develop trust, because in one-off interactions, there's no consequence if you cheat, basically. If you have repeated interactions with another actor, then you have a reason to cooperate in the long run because you learn each other's behaviors and can react to that.
That makes sense. I think there's a difference between I'm fixated now on your traffic strategy. So do you agree that it's not rational to be a resilient cooperator if your goal is purely your own self-interest?
I think it's rational. I like to tell myself it's rational.
Well, okay, let me back up. So if your concern, if your goal, what you're trying to achieve is maximum outcome for all players, and maximum level of cooperation, then resilient cooperation is a rational strategy. That is, it's something that's going to help you achieve that goal.
Right.
But if your goal is simply your own self-interest, it's not rational because you're sacrificing yourself, your own score, in order to achieve a greater level of score and trust for the group.
Well, that would only be the case if the score in this situation is arriving at my destination at the quickest possible time, which I don't think is what I'm trying to achieve in commuting.
Okay, then you are playing the game not at a purely self-interested level.
Right, because I'm trying to reach my destination, but I'm also trying to not live a life of stress, trying to fight tooth and nail to get there as quick as possible. I think building in forgiveness into that activity reduces stress in the long run.
But is lack of stress the only reason why you're not barreling down the pike at 80 miles an hour?
It's one of the reasons, but the other reason too is because I'm a serial law abider, lawful neutral. Much to the frustration of the people around me on the road.
Let's say that that there were no police, okay, and you also personally enjoyed the experience of driving 80 miles. It wasn't stressful for you to drive 80 miles an hour and swerve in and out of cars. I'm guessing that you still wouldn't do it.
No, I wouldn't.
Because you're not playing a game at a purely self-interested level.
Right. Like I said, it's not a zero-sum game, traveling in traffic.
Right. So I guess I'm trying to define two types of reasons to trust. One is a purely utilitarian one, which is it's to my personal advantage and score to cooperate and trust others. I'm in the cave. If I trust these half a dozen other people and I can discriminate on who is going to be working with me, then I'll be able to survive longer and have more offspring and survival-based kind of utility, right? Mm-hmm. But the other is just that the interest of somebody else, the needs of the other are equally as valuable as my own needs, even though I'm me and they're them. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but you value the needs of the other drivers in addition to your own needs.
Yeah,
they have value in and of themselves.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, I think so.
So why is that? Right? It's not rational.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the first recommendation that he gives us, the repeated interactions. Yeah. I obviously repeat this interaction every single day when I drive back and forth to work. But the problem there is that all the other people on the road are basically anonymous to me.
Right.
I don't know if we're having a repeated interaction, even though it seems like we are. If I knew each and every person on the road individually, then I think the trust would increase because you then have a face to the anonymous person in the lane next to you. That's where I think when you're asking for repeated interactions, you need. I don't think it can be simply a anonymous transaction. I think you have to have some sort of human connection to the other actors in the situation.
Yeah. Okay. We can get on to point 2 soon, but so, so the thing I'm still trying to tease out here though is I think I'm making a difference between the need to evolve and establish trust and this persona of the resilient cooperator.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're a resilient cooperator, then I think that you no longer need trust. Like, if I based on principle, right? If I value the needs of others as much as the needs of myself, and I'm about to play an iteration of this game with another actor, I don't need to know if he's gonna burn me or trust me. I've already made my decision. So I would like to hope and think that they will trust me, but I don't need to know. Like, this sort of gets back to there's this basic concept in philosophy of morality and ethics called utilitarianism,
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which is the reason why the base foundation of morality is because it's in my own self-interest. So even things like wanting to cooperate with other people and trusting them and advancing their needs, the only reason that you do it is because it's to your own advantage. And while I think this simulation shows that it is to an individual's advantage to trust in a group dynamic to a degree, and then you can argue in the bowels of advanced game theory about which strategy is actually the most optimal. But I think there's even though it's true, I think that there's another level where you act for in the interest of others, even though it has no positive effect for you, even though it does not advance your own self-interest.
Well, it might not have any observable positive effect, but there might be unintended consequences down the road that you benefit from.
So in this, no, and I know this is just one paper, but it's a good example. So in this notion of these resilient cooperators, right, continue to cooperate at great personal cost.
Mm-hmm.
The question then is, why are they operating at great personal cost? What would motivate somebody to continually play a game and continually get severely burned?
Yeah.
Right, and not change their strategy. They must really value the principle of increased cooperation of others and just simply the interest of others beyond what's advantageous for them. And this is actually one of the reasons why I failed one of the classes I failed in college, philosophy of morality. Did I mention this before? Which is, I had a professor who was a pure hardcore utilitarian and would not accept any possibility that she wouldn't accept the possibility of pure human compassion, acting purely for the concern of others, that you can always take some action and explain it away. And there are really annoying logicians and academics in the history of philosophy who do this over and over and over. And it's what soured me on Western philosophy after a while.
I think that's totally baloney. It can be quite rational to behave as a cooperator because of all the ripple effects that can have on the world around you.
Right, but what I was trying to advance with this professor, and then I got upset, and so I didn't do the work, and that's actually why I failed the class. Was that it's possible to act compassionately for the needs of others without the need for trust in a way that creates no advantage for you. That's not self-advantageous.
Okay, how would that happen?
Say somebody's in a car accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's a good example. You're driving down the road and somebody is in a car and they look like they're in need of assistance. Maybe they're in a dangerous situation, right? Their car is slowly sliding into the lake or whatever. So purely for your own self-interest, your own survival needs, anything that's going to advance you, it's not advantageous for you to interfere. But you do, and you go and try and help this person. Maybe you risk your own safety in a significant way, and you help this person, and maybe they're really ungrateful for the assistance, and maybe the news coverage is all negative, but you're like, whatever. I'm a resilient cooperator. I have a core, pure feeling of compassion for life, and if I see that there is the need to do that, then that's what I do. So now you can kind of, if you do the postscript analysis of this, the cynical rationalist utilitarian would say, well, you did actually get an advantage out of that situation. You felt good about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You created this like feeling of like doing good for others, which is in and of itself utilitarian.
Right.
And you can always read at the end of these papers, nah, 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 nah. Like there's always a way to interpret a situation as utilitarian.
I see.
Okay, that's the conclusion I came to.
Right.
And the other person sitting on the other side would say, yeah, I can't argue with that. I cannot create a structure that is going to disprove your utilitarian interpretation. All I can tell you is that from the subjective experience of it, that it felt positive and compassionate. You're acting out of positive relationship to others, and that there's something beyond self-interest. And you'll go to your grave unable to prove it, but there's something that motivates us to care for others that isn't simply a result of advancing our own self-interest. And it's one of these completely unsolved. It's one of the core unsolved questions of philosophy of morality.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, you're on Team Resilient Cooperator, so that's all I care about. So that was number 1 of 3.
Repeat interactions, right? we have our own repeat interactions every couple of weeks, don't we?
Yes, we'll resiliently record the podcast.
So, recommendation 1, repeat interactions. The second recommendation he makes for developing trust is seek out situations where you have possible win-win situations. Avoid zero-sum games, basically, because zero-sum games breed distrust by design, whereas interactions where both sides can gain benefits can develop trust in the long run.
Yes. Have you ever played cooperative RPGs? Like Forbidden Island is a good example.
I have played some cooperative board games, yes. Generally, I'm not a big fan of cooperative games.
That's funny. So obviously when you're playing a zero-sum war simulation, for example,
right,
with your friends, right? You're not actually trying to kill them.
Right. I'm just trying to win a game. And I like when I do decide to engage in competition, I like there to be a winner. Games that, everyone wins or you all lose is not as appealing to me. I don't know why that is, because in life it certainly appeals to me. But maybe
it's funny.
But maybe that contrast between reality is why I play the games. I don't know.
Yeah. Because the simulation that you're engaging in certainly does not reflect at all how you would actually, like, you would not be a general in real life and trying to crush the armies of others.
Like Pandemic is a very popular cooperative board game. Basically, you all play together to try to stifle a pandemic spreading across the world, and either you all succeed or you all fail together.
Right.
Yeah. I'd rather be the pandemic itself.
It's funny. It makes me think of watching my kids play board games and how they play them at different ages. I mean, we've all probably experienced a Monopoly game with a sore loser, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Monopoly is a fun one because it's mostly random, but there's a little strategy, and if you stretch the house rules, you can have little deals on the side, and so you can kind of backstab people. And yes, so the younger player will might get upset and toss the board around. So I've watched my kids play, like, so for Monopoly example, I've seen like teenagers play it, and because you're older, you understand that it's a game, and so you can be really backstabbing and vindictive and whatever, but it's all in good fun. But I've also played Forbidden Island with my kids, and that's been, I think I've liked both experiences. I think it's harder to construct an engaging cooperative game.
Well, on the other hand, role-playing games are absolutely cooperative games, and I adore those.
That's true. That's
right?
true.
You're all playing on the same team most of the time, or you should be.
Right.
To achieve a group result. I mean, and that genre, I do like cooperative games, I guess. So I guess it depends. Depends what I'm after for the evening's entertainment.
Yeah. I do think about it a bit in terms of how they are presented and used in our culture. Like on the one hand, I do enjoy healthy competition. Like I've talked a little bit about ultimate frisbee. I really like that.
Yeah.
And I see my kids engaging in sports that, hey, they have definite winners and losers, and yet it's certainly not hard to make the case that athletic competition and win at all costs is overemphasized. At
Yes,
least in
absolutely.
American,
Yeah.
at least in American culture, right? That it's you're sort of losing the perspective that it's the experience, it's the journey, not the destination.
Yeah.
Even though you can have a destination, it's the experience of playing, not necessarily
Yeah.
the outcome in a
Yeah,
simulation.
absolutely. I mean, I really enjoy competitive board games, but I would much rather lose a well-played game than win at all costs. The quality of the gameplay is much more important to me than the outcome.
Right. And also it's funny too because we're talking about trust, the personal interactions.
Yeah.
If I'm playing Monopoly with my kids, at the end of the day, I'm not going to sleep excited that I won Monopoly. It's like
You'd be quite a parent if you were.
I crushed my kids. It's a means to an end to having a shared experience.
Right.
So
exactly.
it only exists in order to create those moments of shit. It's like our podcast, Tom. We're not actually journeying towards any grand conclusion. We're just sort of following a thread that periodically, hopefully, creates moments of entertainment / engagement, right? Although I haven't completely revealed my strategy on the podcast. You don't know if I'm playing a non-zero sum game.
Oh, that's right. Maybe you're about to take advantage of the resilient cooperator.
You'll never know. It could, and there could be many finite iterations. We could be on episode 897, and then I just completely stab you in the back.
Yeah, I'll never know when the last episode is.
Oh, I think that's good. All right, so possible win-wins. You have to be playing a non-zero sum game to increase trust.
Right. And the third recommendation he makes is to try to achieve very low miscommunication, to limit mistakes, to limit miscommunications where your compatriots' motivations and intentions are unclear, or your own intentions and motivations are unclear to your opponents.
Right, because how could you detect that somebody is being a cooperator if
Right.
if the noise to signal ratio is too high,
Or even behaving irrationally.
or randomly? In the Adventure Zone scenario, Griffin, the DM, is rolling dice for the choice of their opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So he's playing the truly random agent against the tit for tat strategy, which actually worked out pretty well for them. So that's how to develop trust. So I'm trying to apply this on the fly here to how to develop resilient cooperators.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to adjust these three, I would say one, you don't need any interactions because you have one strategy. It's not going to change. Maybe I would change that to brace for impact. I mean, resilient cooperators. It means, so resiliency, right, means that you keep doing the same thing. It sort of implies you have some sort of base to draw on, some sort of source. You have to be pretty well grounded in why you're doing it. Like, do you ever, in your traffic scenario, do you ever waffle and be like, you know what? I woke up really late. I didn't have my coffee. I am totally going to cut this person off. Or are you 100% dyed in the wool, never going to waver?
Oh, I think that's developed over time. In the past, I've behaved like most people. They try to follow the rules until someone cheats, and then they try to get back at them. Or they think to themselves, if I bend the rules here, it's not going to make any difference to anyone. I can skirt by, But I think as I spent more and more hours in traffic thinking about what am I doing here in this car,
Right.
I've trended towards being a resilient cooperator for whatever reason.
Have you seen the consequences of other people not being cooperators? Has that
Oh yeah, I see that every day.
Okay, because I'm trying to think of this group dynamic, right? Like what would motivate somebody to absorb a high level of personal loss in order to advance the group dynamic? And one possible reason is that you've witnessed or experienced the very negative consequence of essentially the breakdown of trust and the repeated lack of cooperation.
Yeah.
And so you're willing, because again you care about the outcome of the other agents. You're willing to absorb some of that impact in order to maintain the system.
I've been rear-ended on the highway by a tailgater.
Ah,
I would never want to do that to someone else.
right.
That was a huge time suck.
Right. How was that personal interaction, Tom?
Oh,
You want to regale us with that anecdote, or
no? I'm sure I came across the other driver as pretty self-righteously preachy.
right? Well, hey, they probably deserved it, right?
And what I actually been rear-ended a couple times by tailgaters. One time it was two people behind me. One person rear-ended one person, and they subsequently hit me. There was just a whole line of tailgaters all in a row. It was just a chain reaction. After that happens, I would never ever want to do that to someone.
Right.
So I made a very conscious effort after that to just keep a lot of distance between myself and the car in front of me, because that's just selfish.
Well, I'm sure you did have the positive side effect, though, benefit of working out the insurance later. That must have been an enjoyable experience for you. Love insurance paperwork.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you rear-end someone, you're absolutely the at-fault driver in almost every single circumstance. It doesn't even matter if you hit someone in the rear end. It's absolutely your fault.
It's funny. There's quirky laws about that. I once was driving down the road, and a huge piece of metal equipment fell off of the truck in front of me, and I ran over it, and it ended up destroying my undercarriage. And I got the insurance, and I was determined to be at fault. And I had plenty of distance, and I wasn't speeding at all. And so I did a little research, and so it's like, by definition, Massachusetts, if there is one car involved in an impact with another object, then that driver is at fault.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go to the traffic court and plead my case, and they were very understanding, and they're like, okay, it's a no fault accident. But the default assumption was that I was at fault.
That makes sense to me. I mean, you should allow yourself enough space to react to unforeseen driving conditions. And if you're falling too close to that truck and that something falls off of it, you're the at fault.
True. The way I got out of it, though, Tom, was that I showed them a sketch of where I was, where that truck was, and where the cars were in the lanes. It's a 3-lane highway.
Yeah.
On the left and the right of me.
Yep.
And I basically showed how I had enough distance between myself and the truck. This thing came off. By the time, it was dark as well.
Yeah.
By the time I identified this as an object that I could not safely drive over, there was not space in either lane for me to be able to turn.
Yeah.
It would have caused a greater situation to swerve into the car next to me.
Yep.
So I had no choice but to go over
Well,
this.
that's why we have judges, to interpret the law.
Yes, I was vindicated. Just want to get that on the record. don't want to bypass that tangent thinking that I was at fault.
But in general, I think the concept is sound.
Cool. Yeah. So the creation of the resilient cooperator. So possible win-wins
And low miscommunication.
and low miscommunication. I think it would be harder to persistently exist in a zero-sum game being a resilient cooperator. So I guess the analogy would be like, you're playing basketball and you're always giving the ball to the other team. You're always being outscored 100-0. That would be pretty hard to go back in day after day.
Yeah, there's always going to be situations where it's clear that the cooperation is not optimal, but
Right.
I think life is not one of those situations.
So I'll just close the book on board games. Have you ever played one called Diplomacy?
I have.
You have? I don't know if our listeners know that you have. So Diplomacy. So Risk is probably a more understandable version of this game, but basically global conquest game, right?
Yeah.
But with Diplomacy
Diplomacy is absolutely a zero-sum game.
and it's 100% based on trust. In fact, I can't believe we're this long into this discussion, Tom, and it took us this long to mention Diplomacy, the game of trust and lack of trust.
Yeah, it's certainly a game that breeds mistrust by design.
And speaking of plastic crazy straws, there's a hugely intense subculture of Diplomacy. There's like a national our international diplomacy convention every year. They do a big tournament.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've read some articles that they've interviewed some of the players afterward. It just takes such a personal toll on you, right? Because you build up these alliances and all this stuff, and then you completely like
Yeah, it's like a board game version of Survivor, I guess.
yeah, right. But on the pure personal interaction level. So we had a positive experience with that in our youth, didn't we, Tom?
We did. I've never played diplomacy since.
Let's just say not everybody made it to the end of the game. We could leave it at that.
Yeah. A gamer pal of mine once played a game of diplomacy that lasted like 14 years, I think.
Oh my God.
It was a play by email game.
Yeah, so that's the other thing that these players said about the tournament is that it was really difficult after a while to separate the game from their personal lives. Because you think about the most intense relationships you have, those greatly affect your own sense of who you are, right? Your emotional state. So if you have like a ton invested in these interactive relationships, and plus, there's only a certain number of people on the globe who will subject themselves to elite level diplomacy gaming, right? And so your friends are these other players, and so you develop these friendships offline with these people, and then you get into the heat of the tournament, and they're turning on you, and I can't imagine playing for that long, 14 years.
We're gonna have to put that on the list. We should have another game of diplomacy sometime.
Oh my God! I don't know if I should I bet you my kids would dig it. They would like enjoy ganging up on their old man, I think.
I have it on my shelf. I have the game still. I haven't played it in how long it was, but I'd like to play it again.
Oh my gosh, diplomacy.
You have to play it with the right crowd of people who are on the same page as you as far as what you're trying to get out of the game.
Yes, I think most competitions are like that. I keep mentioning Ultimate Frisbee, but I've definitely heard it at the most elite, like world championship, national championship kind of levels. The whole, hey, we're just here to have a good time spirit can go out the window. I mean, people get pretty intense about winning anything and just dedicating their lives to a skill in a competition. It's about what attaching yourself to the outcome, right? Losing the forest for the trees. It's a total bridge on the River Kwai situation, Tom.
Yeah. So the evolution of trust, it's thumbs up from me. It's a cool interactive play toy to learn about game theory. So check it out.
So I'm going to quit my job and develop the evolution of resilient cooperators.
I would like to see that. I will definitely play that game.
I will adjust this, and then we can apply it later, and then we can take it and stuff it in the face of those stuffy utilitarians. Sound like a plan?
Absolutely.
Come back to college with me and have my day. Talk about attachment, man. For years, I would have dreams that I was still in that class and arguing with this professor.
You are bitter about that F, aren't you?
I was more bitter about. Yeah, I am a little bitter about that. And at the end of the day, I still could have overcome it with a little more self-discipline and been like, whatever, I have this disagreement. I'm still going to do the work. But it was ultimately the immaturity of I'm going to spite this professor, but ultimately ended up spiting myself instead. So such as it is.
You'll be on your deathbed one day and wheezing out, take that, utilitarianism.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. You know all that cool content on the internet that you enjoy? A lot of it is the work of independent creators like Nicky Case. You can help support their work by pledging a few bucks to your favorite creators on Patreon. Every little bit helps and makes the internet a better place for everyone.